Test 1 for primary YouTube stream. Test 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Test 2 for backup YouTube stream. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Really? Wow. Let's all do a group bike day too. Wear the helmets or we'll get crucified by the media. Oh yeah, that's easier.
Jerry, you're not on mute.
Yep. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen. I don't have a gavel, Steve. I don't have a gavel. All right. We're back to it. Thank you to our wonderful folks in the clerk's office for getting us back in line. And I want to do some karaoke, but I think we'll continue with the meeting. So I see Councillor Plant is our next speaker. Yeah, we're pretty good dancers.
Salut tout le monde, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui.
Parfait. OK, ben merci beaucoup. Merci d'être là aujourd'hui. Merci pour les merveilleuses présentations. I apologize if I'm doubling up on any previous questions. I had to run and take a quick phone call and I missed the beginning. And I was just wondering, and Conseiller Desroches talked about this a bit, about the enforcement piece. How do people, if they have to, get fined? And then how would you, like, it's not like they have a driver's license, like how do you follow up with them? You know, because I just want to make sure our scooters, like sort of library books, they stay accessible and people can use them. They are a very good mode of transportation. And by the way, if we get rid of them, the students in my ward will riot. But I just want to make sure that we are keeping them accessible, like if people don't have credit cards, that kind of thing.
So the fines, the e-scooter companies themselves can issue a surcharge to their riders through their platform if they feel that the riders are not obeying the rules. They each have sort of their different mechanisms of fines, and then eventually, like I said, it may even be a full suspension of their app. Both companies do have mechanisms where if they don't have, somebody doesn't have a smartphone or a credit card, they can still create an account with the companies and contact them directly. And then they can sort of contact their customer service through an SMS text to unlock a scooter that way.
Okay.
And then we have additional fines that are within the city bylaw that would be just sort of a regular ticket, just as as a cyclist who may have an infraction against the city bylaw that we could issue a fine for things that are against the city bylaw.
All right, and it's just a suggestion, maybe worth doing some sort of partnership with OPL so that way people can like rent a scooter or have a scooter for a certain amount of time, and then it's kind of like we do for museums, and then they can use them without a charge. It's just a suggestion. Again, it may already have been mentioned, but I'm just going to throw it out there. And then the other thing is, I know you said for the enforcement, it is bylaw. Do police ever get involved in ticketing people? How does that work? Or is it just bylaw?
So it's both police and bylaws. So police would be responsible for things that are moving violations. And so last year they did 2 specific blitzes, but they didn't encounter anybody that were doing anything in violation to issue a warning or a fine. The previous year they did issue some warnings and fines under the city's bylaw.
Okay, great. And then my last part is just a bit of a comment as well as what I'm seeing too in some meetings about a development, especially in the Sandy Hill area, is people also want bike share. Is there any plan to use this as a sort of gateway drug to a bike share program?
So our colleagues in roads and parking services have previously presented to council a recommendation in terms of where the city may go one day with a bike share program. Definitely lessons learned from this will definitely feed into that any kind of future program that could come for the city for sure.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for all the great work you're doing, and I will hold off that student riot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go to Councillor Johnson and then back to Vice Chair Lowe.
Thank you. I was just curious to understand further how the relationship with the NCC is going when it comes to the rollout of this program. I know that Corkstown Road was one of the examples where things were being worked out, but in my ward specifically, we have a lot of bike paths and such that are NCC property. So I was just hoping we could hear a comment on how that relationship is progressing and what are the pros and cons of using these devices on the NCC property.
So the NCC still does not allow e-scooters on their property, so on their pathways or their roads, but they fully understand they don't want to create an island of connectivity, and then so they work with us for some of those bridges and things like that, and to ensure that we have still connectivity through their land.
So as this program expands, as we get better density or better walkability in our outer urban wards, if this program expands, I suppose is the proper way, then do you get the sense that the NCC will be coming along for the ride, so to speak?
I do. I think they understand sort of the importance of micromobility and where it's going. But at the federal level, there still is no sort of direction or decision yet on e-scooters specifically.
Because I do think it's an interesting, as you say, micromobility. I think specifically about, how people already don't have a lot of safe pedestrian infrastructure and that this might be better or worse. I'm not sure. So I think there would have to be sort of a geographic understanding of the implications for these technologies in other places. However, those bike paths are the way that people can move through these, really high car-centric neighborhoods safely. So to do that in absence of the partnership with NCC, I think would be a really a big missed opportunity. And I do hope that, however I can assist in working through those connections, because that is how we get people. I think about, Woodward, we've got shopping in Woodward. We have a lot of intensification coming to Woodward, and then going down through to College Square, going down through to intensification that's happening at Pinecrest Queensview. All of that linkage could be well supported through some NCC connectivity. But otherwise, we are going to be seeing the situation where we push them onto Baseline, or we push them onto Iris. And I think that will cause a lot of concerns, especially with on-street parking on Iris. And it becomes a little trickier. So I'll look forward to working together with you as it expands.
Thank you, Councillor, and completely agree. And we hear those comments quite a bit. We hope the NCC gets on board one day. There's a lot of uptake on this. People that, go 6 blocks to get a salad where they could take an NCC path instead of jumping into a car. This would be a great way to do that. So thank you. Completely agree. Vice Chair Lowe.
6 kilometers for a salad. No, I supplement those comments, and I think this would be valuable once we're at the stage where we have to go through the green belts down to the southern suburbs and the west and east. I had a question earlier that I forgot to ask because I wrote it somewhere else. In terms of parking, are there any future considerations to kind of integrate them with the car-shaped bike corrals that we have in some? I think they're only in the Glebe and Wellington West right now. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but are there any considerations of integrating like bike parking with e-scooter parking in the future, whether it's through retrofit or future procurement?
At the moment, no, we want to reserve those spaces for bikes. There is a high demand for bike parking, and then so we want to make sure that we continue to have a good supply of bike parking. And then so we would be at the moment, no, we have not had those considerations.
Okay, that's it. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. And Councillor Devine had some direction based on some great questioning. I'm not sure he's probably fine with the removal of parking spaces for scooters, but the question about transit does exist. So Councillor Devine?
I just wanted to, I did have a possible direction to staff, but I just wanted to follow up on what Councillor Johnson was asking there about NCC pathways, because, in my own ward as well, like I don't anticipate this coming to my ward until those kinds of issues are addressed. So my first question pertaining to city-owned multi-use pathways, of which there are many in my ward, are there any prohibitions of e-scooters on city-owned multi-use pathways? Great. And with regards to NCC pathways, other than, I don't want to use, can you explain what, because this is news to me, can you let me know what might be the overall reason why NCC has been resistant? And are there any modifications to something that we can do to perhaps address those? Because I would like to see that taken care of, if it's even possible.
Well, so like I said, so nationally, there's still no regulations pertaining to e-scooters. Each province is sort of dealing them with on an individual basis. And then so right now in the province of Ontario, it's still a pilot of whether we would allow e-scooters on provincial roadways. And that's why it's still a pilot here within Ottawa. So the NCC's position is still that they do not want to allow these on their facilities yet. That may change in the future, but right now the position is still no.
And is that they don't want to allow it because that would set precedent nationally?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just sort of the hesitancy, like of a lot of other municipalities too around the world, who are sort of hesitant about these machines and.
So I don't understand bureaucratic hesitancy. I kind of understand that concept. Joking. Okay, thank you. I think I understand what's going on there. What I wanted to also pose was perhaps I've never done one, but a direction to staff. And thank you to my colleague for suggesting that I push on this. With regard to the question I had asked earlier about potential lost revenue from transit, could I ask for can I make a direction to staff that you could report back on what those potential lost revenues might be? You were factoring a net loss of 9%. I'm not looking for the answer now unless you have a really good calculator.
If I may, Councillor, I think that may be very difficult to analyze. And in our presentation, the average distance on these things is only 2.2 kilometers.
Yeah, that's what I was,
Yeah.
because even in looking at the data, it was like a data sample of around 1,000 people. And so you're talking about, so when you were projecting 9% net loss of transit from a data sample of around 1,000 people in a pretty small contained area, are you essentially telling me that that 9% loss of revenue is really not that big a thing considering what transit is no longer being used? Great. I'm reassured. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Great. I don't see any more hands up. I want to really thank Heidi. You know, when you started on this road, what a journey to get to this point. And Vivi, you should be very proud of your team. Terrific job. I think I called you Heather today, by the way, at one point. I apologize. I don't know why I had that in my head. But on this, is this item carried?
All right.
Thank you very much. Steve's laughing. Story time with Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those who are watching this meeting on YouTube, we were having intermittent audio issues with the primary live stream. A second live stream is now on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel, so we will be ending the live stream that had the audio problems. Those who are listening now may wish to refresh their screen and go back to that other live stream. So we've sent out an email to members of council and staff, but just wanted to make sure that those who are listening in got that information as well.
Great. Thank you very much for that. So at this point, we're moving on to item, I guess they call it 5.2 now, right-of-way patio bylaw update and new urban design guidelines for commercial patios. We have Court Curry and Lauren Duran. And forgive me,
Mark Young, Program
Mark.
Manager for Public Realm and Urban Design.
I
No worries.
for the first. I couldn't remember the last, so thank you. And I do want to thank you. I think last year we had a pretty successful year. I know you've been addressing many questions from my colleagues about enforcement, garbage, and things like that, and working hard with our committee members. But at this point, I'll open the floor to questions.
We're jumping right to questions.
Yeah, it's a rinse and repeat of last year, everybody. Like there's nothing really new here. So if there's no questions. Oh, forgive me. That's why I held it. I was like, why am I holding this? We do have a delegation. We have Cheryl Parrott online. I apologize, folks. I was confused myself.
Which agenda item are we? 0.2? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I do have oh, here it comes, a presentation. So the Hintonburg Community Association very much supports the addition of patios along traditional main streets. They really do enhance and animate the street and provide eyes on the street for safety. We've got at least 15 in Hintonburg. But there are some issues, and we worked with right-of-way staff, and they've been responsive to most of the concerns. We still have some existing concerns. Slide 2, please. So most issues don't repeat, but regular education and reminders are really important to try to keep the clear pedestrian path to at least 1.8 meters. And the patio creep happens, as well as A-frame migration into the pedestrian path, and they need constant reminders. Next slide, please. We're pleased to see the guidelines requiring a 2-meter clearway, as 1.8 meters, which we have right now, is not quite enough with bikes, carriages, dogs attached to the street infrastructure, which really narrows the path. But we do have some concerns. So in the suggested design details, it requires the unobstructed path of 2 meters, but it also states the path should be as straight as possible for easy navigation. And we really agree with that. And this is what this shows. So next slide, please. This is the same location, but no longer a straight path. There's lots of infrastructure there to meander around. So pedestrians have to walk out of their way into the crosswalk waiting area, which is sloped, has a tactile walking surface indicator, and there's just so much infrastructure here. Next slide, please. Then they have to turn another 90 degrees to get back on the straight path. And you can see that the pedestrian area that they have to walk through is sloped, and you can see that tactile surface there as well. Next slide. Sometimes you have to squeeze past people waiting to cross at the signalized crosswalk, and this is a really long light. So sometimes people have to back into the patio entrance to let others pass by, and I've seen this a number of times. And also people, you know, anyone with sight issues may be a bit confused of the tactile walking surface where it's located when they're trying to meander around this. Next slide. This is the same intersection in the winter. And as a snow mole team leader in Hintonburg, this is a real issue for us. Because of the patio infrastructure, the snowplow can't get there. And so pedestrians can't access it. And you can see that pedestrian beg button there too, that's sandwiched in among these planters. So now city staff have required the patio owner to clear the crosswalk, but that doesn't happen when the restaurant's not open. And sometimes that might be 2 days that it's like this. So winter use of wall-side patios or not removing infrastructure is a concern and is resulting in frequent service requests to 311. So this is a patio location. Of the 15 we have, this is one that we disagree with staff. Next slide, please. And those pesky A-frames migrating right into the tiny pedestrian walkway again. This is the same patio. So we submit that this is an example, it's an accessibility and a safety issue for those with low impaired vision and mobility issues. And we did watch one resident last summer with very low vision. He was able to navigate around this obstacle very slowly and very carefully. But this is also very close to a seniors high-rise building where one expects that you're going to have increasing vision and mobility issues. Next slide. What we suggest is conducting site visits before authorizing patios to understand the constraints, because we think they're not always indicated on the application form. So this is another patio where, because of all the infrastructure, the fire hydrant, the wires for the hydro pole, it narrowed the walkway to 24 inches, which just is a real safety issue. And this person in this very tiny scooter was able to inch by it without going over the curb. So we think a site visit would have helped initially. Now staff came out last year and they did help correct this. And I believe it managed to get through the summer without patio creep happening. Next slide, please. This patio was built over top of this fire hydrant. So again, recommending some site visits, because I doubt that this was on the plan that was submitted to the city. And I doubt the city authorized this, because when we brought it to their attention, the patio had to be redone. Next slide, please. We also have concerns about the tree canopy. So this is on city right of way, and perhaps the tree will survive, perhaps it won't, but we're losing our tree canopy every day. And so this is a concern. So we're happy to continue to work with right of way staff to ensure that patios enhance the community and work for everyone, for safety and for accessibility. But that proactive checking, I think, would help, and perhaps something in the middle of the summer, because putting pedestrians at risk to accommodate patios really isn't a great fit. Thank you.
Thank you again, Cheryl. You always give a good delegation. I'm looking around the table. I don't see any questions, but I'm sure it will generate questions to staff. So thank you for your delegation today.
Thank you.
At this point, do we have questions to staff? Councillor Trost.
Hi, me again. There's a lot of patios in my ward. So yeah, I will say I would really like to hear how the city can monitor to ensure that we're not creating those choke points that the delegate just mentioned. My only concern with patios, frankly, are accessibility concerns. And the other question I have is when I met with some folks from Stopgap Ottawa during my campaign, they mentioned that often these patios have a step up and are actually inaccessible to people who use wheelchairs or mobility devices, whereas there's other cities that have a baked-in accessibility requirement for any of these patios. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to those two issues. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the excellent feedback and the questions, Councillor Troster. In terms of the accessibility lens, it's certainly one that we put on all patios when we're reviewing and issuing permits. We do conduct site visits and accessibility walkabouts when issues are raised. So we have done accessibility walkabout in both Byward and in Hintonburg to address any issues that are raised. And we certainly look to inspect and address any issues as they arise. As part of the question about the accessibility, we do have the guidelines now, which again reinforce the need for patios to meet accessibility design standards. Obviously, when we're doing the permitting process, you know, we look for all of these things, but quite often there is some inspection component that has to happen after the fact. So we appreciate the feedback also from Hindenburg Community Association, and we'll continue to work with them on addressing any issues that arise within the right of way.
Okay, so if a business constructs a patio that is not wheelchair accessible, is that something that someone could report to bylaw to bring it into compliance?
Yes, that's correct.
That's great. And yeah, I'm just wondering if it's possible to have signage or something to remind guests not to block the sidewalk. I think what I read during this report is part of the issue is not even necessarily the way the patio was initially set up, but then the creep that kind of happens over the season. So, you know, any sort of public education or signage, I think would improve the situation. But overall, I am supportive of lively street life. And I've heard nothing but good things about the loosening the regulations in the way that we did during the pandemic. So I think folks do want to see this continue, but I do want to make sure that our sidewalks are accessible.
Completely agree. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Councillor Plant, if that's okay, Vice Chair Lowe. Councillor Plant.
Oui, merci beaucoup. I was just wondering, I had a couple questions about, if it's okay to ask the questions about the 2 a.m. limit on the patio. Is that okay, Chair? I guess, no. Yeah, okay. So my question was, I just want to make sure that we do have bylaw coverage until 2 a.m. In the areas where we will be allowing the patios to function. The reason I say that is there were quite a few actually complaints about people who were, I don't know why, using like at 2 a.m. starting to play instruments and stuff on these patios in the Byward. And Chair Tierney, I can tell you it was not Nickelback worthy. And so they were just wondering if bylaw could be summoned to deal in those situations, as I was not clear as to how late they function, especially given the busy patio season we have ahead. And as we mentioned, their stretched resources. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We do have bylaw services here and they're hyper aware of this. No drums, amplification after 11 o'clock, and I'll allow bylaw to speak to that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Our hours of operation for bylaw and regulatory services are Sunday to Thursday, 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. and Fridays and Saturdays, 6 a.m. to 4 a.m. So yes, to answer the question, we do have coverage. Merci beaucoup, Jennifer. J'apprécie.
And thank you, Councillor Plant. I know you have a lot of patios as well, and I appreciate the work behind the scenes. Councillor Plant was very concerned about the sound, about the garbage, and I appreciate the work in advance of this meeting to make sure we were able to address those issues. Vice Chair Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the concerns raised by the public delegate, it seems like it's a result of just kind of bodging of things that we add to the street over time. Like there's a hydrant that's already there, there's hydro wires that's already there, and then we kind of go and add a patio and whatever else. When these patios get added, is there something similar to what like a utility circulate? You know how in road construction we do a road utility circulation? Is there something similar like that, so that every stakeholder is involved, so the concerns can be circulated and communicated?
Through you, Chair, that's an excellent question. Councillor Lowe, yes, we do a circulation for all new patios. And so those elements are reviewed.
Thank you. And then supplementary question. There was an interesting photo of one of the patios that had a canopy over a fire hydrant. Is that legal?
Through you, Chair, that would not be considered appropriate. And it sounds like in that instance, the patio was removed. I'm assuming it does not meet building code, and there's certain separations from something like a fire hydrant that are required. I believe it's 1.5 meters.
Thank you. And then lastly, in instances where like public art can be shifted to kind of help improve accessibility in the sidewalk, can we do that, or do we need to involve the original artist because maybe the placement had something to do with the art itself?
Through you, Chair, we certainly could work with our colleagues in public art to see if that's an option. Don't know if it would be in some instances. So we would have to determine how permanent the piece is and whether or not it's appropriate on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems like there's one or two that can actually maybe be integrated into part of the patio, like that the fire hydrant art with the camera in Melrose, I think. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Lowe. Your bronze statue we will ensure is not in the encroachment in the future. That being said, I'm looking around the table. I don't see any hands up. I want to thank all you guys. You've done a terrific job on this. So on this item, is this item carried? Thank you very much, folks, and thank you again. I'm on to the next, and I forget the acronym. We don't have speakers on it, but the Strategic Road Safety Action Plan Annual Report. Very exciting, positive story. We like to have positive stories. We like positive stories that don't involve snow as well. So this is a good news story here.
Good morning, Chair and Councillors. This morning, I have with me Kathy Karuma, who is the Program Manager for Road Safety, and Krista Tanaka, who is Manager for Safety and Mobility with Traffic Services. And today we are going to present to you our Strategic Road Safety Action Plan accomplishments for 2022 and the plan for 2023. I'll pass it over to Kathy now.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Next slide, please. So just to provide some background on the 2022 to 2024 Strategic Road Safety Action Plan, the City of Ottawa developed its first multidisciplinary action plan in 2023. The first iteration of the program ran from 2003 to 2011 under the banner of Integrated Road Safety Action Program. In 2012, the Safer Road Ottawa program was launched as the city's second road safety action plan. The 2012 plan was the first of its kind in Canada to adopt Vision Zero type wording in the goal and vision statements. The plan saw a 14% reduction in the overall fatal and major injury collisions between 2012 and 2016. In 2017, the direction from Council was provided to update the Road Safety Action Plan, specifically taking into consideration Vision Zero principles, community consultation, a self-funding model, and a communications plan. Next slide, please. City Council approved the 2020 to 2024 Strategic Road Safety Action Plan in December 2019. The plan has a theme of Think Safety, Act Safely, and focuses efforts and resources where they are needed the most to have the greatest impact on reducing collisions resulting in serious injury or death. The vision of the plan is a comprehensive and proactive strategy for making Ottawa roads safe for all road users. The plan works towards a goal of a reduction in the average annual rate of fatal and major injury collisions of 20% by 2024. In addition, Council further approved a longer-term goal of zero fatalities on our streets by 2035, with a focus on the safety of the most vulnerable road users of our transportation system. Next slide, please. The plan is data-driven, has measurable outcomes, and aligns with the principles of Safe Systems Approach and Vision Zero, in which human health and life are prioritized. Road safety is a shared responsibility between roadway providers, regulators, and road users. Human error on the road should not lead to death or serious injury. Road safety requires a change in culture and is data-driven, meaning we use the data to identify and inform engineering, enforcement, and education measures. Next slide, please. The Road Safety Action Plan annual reporting structure to Transportation Committee and Council ensures that those delivering the plan are accountable and that the plan is feasible and effective based on available resources. A plan with a safe systems approach requires that engineering, enforcement, and education all work together, and that those delivering the initiatives are aware of the actions and progress of the other groups, as well as provide support as needed. To accomplish this, the continued partnership between traffic services, Ottawa Police, Fire, and Paramedic Services, and Ottawa Public Health is essential. Each year, we report back to Transportation Committee and Council on our progress from the previous year, as well as propose the plan for the current year. Due to the election year, the timing of this annual report falls later in the year, but going forward, the annual report can be expected in Q4 of any given year. Excuse me. The Road Safety Action Plan is coordinated by Traffic Services through the Safer Roads Ottawa program with an existing overall structure as shown. The steering committee includes senior leadership from Ottawa Police, Fire, and Paramedic Services, Ottawa Public Health, Traffic Services, and the Regional Supervising Coroner. The internal working group includes representatives from each of these partner agencies responsible for delivering the initiatives in the implementation plan. The stakeholder and external working group consists of representatives of local road safety partners. In Ottawa, this is a well-established group that has provided support to the program for many years. Next slide, please. A key component of the Road Safety Action Plan is the opportunity to seek input from both internal and external stakeholders. Our community partners care about road safety, are champions in the community, and support us by generously committing their time to the Road Safety Action Plan external working group. In 2022, we had in attendance the Ottawa Disability Coalition, Enviro Center, Ottawa School Transportation Authority, the Consortium du Transport Scolaire de Ottawa, Federation of Citizens Association of Ottawa, Council on Aging, the Ottawa Safety Council, and MAD. We also encourage our members to inform us of other organizations that we can bring to the table. In 2022, we held 4 meetings with this group, and 4 meetings are planned again in 2023. The internal working group consists of the various partners shown and meets frequently to track the progress of the implementation plans, engineering, enforcement, and education initiatives. 9 meetings were held in 2022, and monthly meetings are planned this year in 2023. Next slide, please. So in addition to the initiatives identified in the Road Safety Action Plan, the City of Ottawa has several other plans and programs that contribute to road safety. Many of the plans and programs shown on this slide proactively address road safety. For example, the local residential streets 30-kilometer design guideline identifies speed reduction measures that must be applied to all new local residential streets or when reconstruction reoccurs. This helps to ensure that local roads are designed for 30 kilometers per hour operating speeds. Next slide, please. In terms of the Road Safety Action Plan funding, in 2021, Council approved the Automated Speed Enforcement and School Bus Camera Pilot Project Report. As indicated in the report, All net automated enforcement revenue is allocated to the Road Safety Reserve Fund. The funding is then used towards the implementation of the initiatives in the annual Road Safety Action Plan implementation plan. This year, in 2023, the program budget is $6.35 million. Next slide, please. So this table shows the breakdown of the 2023 Road Safety Action Plan funding by emphasis areas. The plan focuses on 4 main emphasis areas, which are vulnerable road users, including cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcyclists, intersections, rural areas, and high-risk drivers, which includes aggressive, distracted, and impaired drivers. The plan also includes an overarching countermeasure referred to as road safety culture. These emphasis areas were developed through an in-depth review of historical collision data for the City of Ottawa, as well as internal and external consultations held during the development of the 2020 to 2024 Road Safety Action Plan. The plan focuses on investing resources and funding to implement engineering, enforcement, and education countermeasures that are shown to reduce fatal and major injury collisions on Ottawa roads. It should be noted that the emphasis areas summarized are not mutually exclusive and sometimes overlap. For example, funding in the vulnerable road users area to implement a protected intersection also provides overall safety benefits in the intersection emphasis area. Next slide, please. Collision data is extremely important to measure the plan's effectiveness and to ensure that the plan is data-driven, which is a key component of the Safe Systems approach. Traffic Services receives collision data that occurs within the City of Ottawa from the MTO on a continual basis. The data is validated through the city's collision data management system software program to ensure that there are no errors or missing information. Errors are addressed by staff, and often there is follow-up with reporting policing agencies to gather more information. Historically, Traffic Services has waited until all the collision data for a given year has been reviewed and validated, and prior to releasing it via a memo to council and posting it on Open Data Ottawa. This process would often result in delays in releasing the annual data set. Therefore, moving forward, Traffic Services will post collision data to the public utilizing open data shortly after it's received and validated. This will ensure that collision is available to the public in a much more timely manner. Next slide, please. So to ensure the road safety action plan's effectiveness, it's important to monitor collision trends over 5-year periods. This is due to the year-over-year fluctuation in collision data. So 2013 to 2017 represents the baseline period in which subsequent years are compared to. This table presents a summary of the 3 key performance indicators comparing the baseline to the most recent data available, which is the 2017 to 2021 timeframe. The factors include total number of fatal and major injury collisions, 5-year average fatal and major injury collision rate, and the average number of fatalities. A collision is considered to be major injury if the person involved sustained an injury that was severe enough for the person to be transported and admitted to hospital as a result of the collision. So these 3 indicators help us to monitor the overall performance of the plan, which focuses on reducing fatal and major injury collisions. There are on average approximately 13,000 collisions in the city per year. However, the focus of the Road Safety Action Plan is to reduce and eliminate the fatal and major injury collisions as referred to in this table. These are the types of collisions that represent the greatest cost to Ottawa residents in terms of pain, suffering, health, and financial impacts. From the data in the chart, all the key indicators are trending downward, However, we must note that the data that due to the impacts of the pandemic, there have been fewer trips by residents given the various restrictions that have been in place, as well as a significant corresponding decrease in reported collisions. Next slide, please. So now I will discuss each of the emphasis areas in more detail, providing an overview of the collision statistics and a few highlights of the measures completed in 2022 and those proposed in 2023. A full listing of the implementation measures can be found in the supplemental documents provided with the staff report. Starting with vulnerable road users, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists are the most vulnerable road users of our roads. Out of 673 fatal and major injury collisions between 2017 and 2021, 25% involved pedestrians, 14% involved motorcyclists, 10% involved cyclists, and less than 1% involved an e-bike rider. Next slide, please. So each year, countermeasures are identified in the area of engineering, enforcement, and education to help reduce fatal and major injury collisions in each of the emphasis areas. As part of the 2022 Road Safety Action Plan implementation plan, accomplishments include high visibility ladder markings implemented at 12 locations, Be Safe, Be Seen gear, which includes lights and reflective products for cyclists and pedestrians distributed to all Ottawa fire stations, and proposed in the 2023 implementation plan, continuing to implement high visibility ladder markings, as well as proactively implementing leading pedestrian intervals and no right turns on red. Next slide, please. In the area of cyclists, 2022 accomplishments include detailed designs completed for 3 of the high volume cycling vehicle interaction locations and detailed design initiated for 1 additional high volume location. Proposed in the 2023 plan is to allocate partial funding to implement cycling enhancements at up to 3 of the high volume cycling vehicle interaction locations. Next slide, please. In the area of motorcyclists, in 2022, continued work with the Motorcycle Safety Working Group, as well as training provided to 145 riders through a subsidized training program. Proposed in 2023 is to implement measures identified in the motorcycle safety strategy, which is currently underway, and to continue to deliver motorcycle safety training courses. Next slide, please. Moving on to the second emphasis area, which is intersections. More than half of all fatal and major injury collisions in Ottawa each year happen at intersections. Out of the 673 fatal and major injury collisions, 57% occurred at or related to intersections. Next slide, please. The 2022 accomplishments include construction at 1 at-grade rail crossing to improve conditions for vulnerable road users, protected left turn phasing installed at 5 locations. Proposed for 2023 is to continue to conduct detailed safety assessments jointly with the Rail Authority at 4 at-grade rail crossings, and to continue to implement protected left turn phasing at up to 5 locations. Next slide, please. Moving on to the third emphasis area, rural roads. More fatal injury collisions happen on Ottawa rural roads than anywhere else in the city. This is often due to the higher speeds on rural roads resulting in more severe collisions. Out of the 673 fatal and major injury collisions, 23% occurred in rural areas, and 40% of all fatal injury collisions occurred in rural areas. Next slide, please. In 2022, 23 linear kilometers of gravel shoulders were upgraded on rural roads, and safety edges were installed at 1 corridor during resurfacing. And it is proposed in the 2023 implementation plan to continue to implement safety edges on rural roads as part of resurfacing and conduct an education and outreach in rural schools related to motorized recreational vehicles. Next slide, please. Our fourth emphasis area is high-risk drivers. Aggressive, distracted, and impaired driving was a contributing factor in fatal and major injury collisions. Out of 673 fatal and major injury collisions, approximately 67% involved high-risk driver behavior. Next slide, please. In 2022, Drop It and Drive presentations were provided to over 700 high school students. 9 automated speed enforcement cameras were installed in the vicinity of schools. Proposed in the 2023 implementation plan is to continue to implement engineered traffic calming measures in the vicinity of 3 schools, as well as the installation of 17 new automated speed enforcement cameras in school areas, playgrounds, and parks, and as a pilot study at high-speed locations. Camera locations were recently released in a memo to Council on February 22nd, and the locations noted in the memo as pending hydro review have since been confirmed. Of the 17 cameras, 11 will be installed in school areas, 2 in areas of parks, and 4 in high-speed areas, as staff were directed by Council to pilot the effectiveness of speed cameras at reducing the number of high-speed drivers and incidents of street racing. For these locations, the data will be collected over the next year and evaluated to determine the effectiveness of the cameras in these areas. The outcome of this pilot project will be reported back to Council and Transportation Committee as part of the Road Safety Action Plan annual update report in 2024. Next slide, please. Finally, beyond the 4 emphasis areas I just mentioned, we have an overarching emphasis area referred to as road safety culture. The 3 main areas we're focusing in road safety culture are the Road Safety Action Plan communication strategy, road safety training, and road safety audits. In 2022, the delivery of the 2022 communications plan was completed. It involved targeted campaigns aimed at education and changing the behavior of road users. 77 staff attended the road safety training sessions. This training is provided to all staff who make decisions about the roadway, and it highlights key safety considerations for each of the emphasis areas. In addition, road safety audits were conducted on 10 city-led roadway design projects, and road safety audits help to evaluate potential safety risks to the various road users and identify potential mitigation measures in terms of updating designs prior to construction. In 2023, similarly, we will continue with these 3 areas under road safety culture. Next slide, please. To conclude, the Road Safety Action Plan focuses on reducing fatal and major collisions by implementing engineering, enforcement, and educational countermeasures in each of the emphasis areas. These countermeasures are selected using a data-driven approach, which helps to focus resource and funding where they are needed the most. Embracing a change in road safety culture requires that internal and external partners continue to work together to reduce fatalities and major injuries on Ottawa roadways. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to thank you. And just a reminder to everyone that blows by ASC or automated speed enforcement, it's not a cash grab. You're making our streets safer. I know that Councillor Johnson has a specific, this is very close to her heart when it comes to this. So questions about RSAP, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I do have several questions, so I'll only start with a few and let other people jump in and see where we go. But I think I'd like to start off just with the opportunity as a new councillor to understand better how the planning department and the traffic department work together on goals like road safety. Because without a doubt, what I'm hearing from you in your presentation is that you are focused on traffic engineering measures that would reduce high-speed collisions and work towards zero fatalities. However, I would suggest, and I know that we all know this, that road design and planning is actually one of our largest levers to creating road safety. So I know that some parts of the traffic group, ostensibly traffic groups, sit in planning while others sit in traffic. And I don't understand it. And so I was hoping that we could use this opportunity to explain how how this change came to be and what advantages it offers and maybe what disadvantages it might offer to these teams working collectively together on shared goals.
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Chair. I can confirm that we do work very closely together. At one point, the two groups were together, and through various reorgs over the years, that we've landed up in different departments. However, we work very closely together on many projects, and I'll let Vivi expand on that as well.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, we're very closely linked with traffic services, transportation planning, even from the planning studies, from EAs all the way through to traffic calming, which is getting closer to the kind of the operational side. And also our review of development applications from the transportation perspective. So there's a very, very strong link. Now, some may feel that there is a bit of an overlap for traffic calming, or ours is a neighborhood traffic calming program. And it's because the work that we do has more ramifications when we implement some measures than perhaps a speed hump here or there, very, very localized. Whereas if we make changes, it could push traffic onto other roads, and we don't want that to happen. So there's a little bit more, it's more complicated, our files, whereas for the temporary traffic calming, the measures are easier to implement. And we really want to make sure that those things go through very, very quickly, because, that's they don't need to be held up by pushing them into our program.
And so as you've made these organizational changes, have there been advantages or disadvantages to having these two different departments work on the same role? Can you comment whether there's strengths or weaknesses in the organization when it comes to working together on goals like road safety?
Yeah, I think it's great because we bring the planning aspect, and we are meeting with our colleagues who bring the operational aspect, which is great to have those two linked together in the files that we work on. I believe in that. I believe in collaboration. If it's just for information, but at least it's there, and we're sharing this work. This decision was made, I think, about 15 years ago when the organization changed. Transportation planning, as you know, or you may not know, but in 2016, we got moved from the planning over to transportation services. So we span both in our name, transportation planning. So we span both.
Thank you for that. I do find as a new counselor, it can be sort of challenging to understand how the two work together, and I'll look forward to understanding more. Certainly not to say that I haven't had very positive experiences working with your teams, but I know, for example, we will have some opportunities in College Ward to think through how more permanent traffic calming can be maybe leveraged a bit more quickly, and I'm looking forward to that opportunity. I would like to further the question, we've got, and again, maybe this is one of the places where maybe it doesn't span, but in my head it does. I see that there were 10 road safety audits completed and for across the city-led transportation projects. I just wonder how many transportation projects were there, or how do you determine when a road safety audit is appropriate or inappropriate? And how, because I know that tool is also really essential. So how do we know that we're doing as many as we need to? Please do let me know.
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. Yes, through the Road Safety Action Plan, we actually developed a road safety audit procedure for all the project managers throughout the city working on transportation-related projects. And that procedure details specifically when a road safety audit is required, recommended or optional for a transportation-related project. And it's based on a number of factors, including the type of roadway, the overall cost of the project, the type of project. So there's a very specified procedure that we use to identify when a road safety audit is required. And once it is deemed required, the project team is required to hire an independent consultant to review the design from a road safety perspective, which is a broader perspective. And consultants and engineers always use the guidance that's available to do the roadway designs, but the road safety audit is different in the sense that it looks at safety cumulatively in terms of all the design decisions that are taken throughout the design stages. So that audit would identify at that time any potential road safety issues, and the design team has the opportunity to resolve those issues before anything is ever constructed. So that's the advantage of proactively conducting road safety audits.
So just one more question on this, Chair, and then I'll move along or let other people jump in. So when it comes to the road safety audits, when you're describing, what did you say? You said safety across many, you said safety across many what? Sorry?
Sorry, it looks at the design from a safety perspective.
Right. So I just wonder, within this procedure, and pardon me that I haven't seen it, but I am very curious about it. I just would want to make sure that it's triggered at all instances, that we would understand it to be triggered, or that residents might understand, I guess is the more appropriate one. So I think it might look at some of the big priorities or the big principles of the road safety design plan, right? So you're talking about human life being prioritized, and that human error should not relate to or should not lead to death. I wonder, or injury, serious injury. I wonder sometimes, are there conflicts between which kind of road user you are looking at when it comes to these priorities? Like, I wonder sometimes the principles that we use that keep motorists safe, like wide lanes or clear views or long blocks or all these other aspects that make sure that they can accelerate and decelerate safely, might actually be in conflict with some of the things that keep pedestrians safe or cyclists safe. So within this road safety audit, do you come at it from all sides, or do you prioritize a certain road user's safety over others? Is that your vulnerable users, or how do you work through that?
Yes, thank you for the question through you, Chair. The road safety audit does consider human factors, and it does look at any trade-offs or design decisions that were made throughout the life of the project from the perspective of each of the road users. It then assesses the potential risk associated with those elements of the design, so that when there are instances where trade-offs are made, they're assessed based on risks and to who the risks are addressed to. So if there are risks to vulnerable road users, that would be identified in the road safety audit. Thank you.
It sounds good. Councillor Drews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am really happy to see this presentation, and I know that I'm not surprised to see the percentage of fatality on our rural road, and I know it's very important, not only rural road, every road. If we can prevent them and if we can avoid them, that will be amazing, not only in rural area but across the city. I'm very in support of the road safety plan. I also have a comment. I want to also thank staff for working and see that they include the intersection of Victoria and Cartwright. Mr. Chair, this is a very dangerous intersection, and back before amalgamation, I don't know what they were thinking or what water they were drinking. The intersection built, they're totally unsafe. And with the way that our resident drive these days, I know it's becoming very dangerous. So I'm happy to see that, because my community has been really working hard. I also want just a clarification or some maybe maybe some more explanation what they mean by on page 18, the education for recreational motor vehicle, like in schools and things. Can someone maybe collaborate a little bit more on that?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. That educational countermeasures refers to increasing the awareness in rural schools related to motorized recreational vehicles. So our intention is to go to schools and improve on the communications about the safety of using those types of vehicles. We have seen reported instances of serious collisions involving younger age residents using motorized recreational vehicles. So we would like to improve on our education and messaging in that area.
Thank you. But when you mean recreational vehicle, like what you're trying, that's included? Is that including like four-wheelers, snowmobiles, dirt bikes, and things like that?
Yes, exactly. All the ATV vehicles, snowmobiles.
Can I also, if you don't mind, through you, Mr. Chair, is not a direction, just a suggestion. Can you please reach out to my office? If you want to implement, I can give you lots of good feedback and what you can add to this program, from also respecting the property owner, the people that they live around the schools and things like that. That will be very important, and it goes a long way.
Yes, thank you.
And finally, Mr. Chair, I don't probably agree with you on I think it's the automated speed enforcement in small communities and things. I think probably people will call it cash grab, if you like it or you don't, but probably we don't agree to, we'll let disagree on that one, agree to disagree, but I will see what we go with that one. But thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Derues. You're a very safe snowmobiler, by the way. You may have almost killed our former mayor, but aside from that, we'll make sure that the education effort is out there. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for the presentation. I think that Councillor Derues' comments are a good segue into my question around automated speed enforcement. I'm fortunate enough to have a location on Hunt Club Road, which has been a huge raceway and a concern for residents for a long time in my community. My question is the focus, I guess, in the media seems to be around how many tickets are issued at each camera. And I think that plays into the narrative that it's a cash grab. And I'd like to see that narrative change to, how effective are those cameras at reducing the speed of the roadway? And so to that end, I'm wondering how quickly, I know that there'll be a report after a year on the effectiveness, but how quickly can we have access to the data and how it's been effective in reducing the speed? And maybe we can communicate that out better to residents. And has there been any consideration given to reporting earlier on the effectiveness of reducing speed as opposed to the number of tickets issued by each camera?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. We will be collecting data on a monthly basis for all of those 4 pilot sites that were identified for 2023 implementation. We are also working on, currently on open data, we put out information related to charge volumes at each of the sites, and we are working on a new data sheet that will be putting out on a regular basis, more in terms of speeds from when the original cameras put in, and our 3 key indicators related to compliance with the speed limits, reduction in operating speed, as well as reduction in the percentage of high-end speeders. So our plan is to do that hopefully soon, get that information out on open data as well.
That's great, because I think that's the story we need to focus on as a city, is that, our ultimate goal is compliance. We want to see safer roads. And this is one low-cost tool that we can use to have that. And I think it will have an impact on roads like Hunt Club. So if there could be consideration given to maybe developing a communication strategy around the effectiveness of those cameras in those locations and messaging that out, in the interim before we do that final report, so that when residents write in who are upset about getting, a ticket, we can use that information to show the value that those cameras are providing in our community and making roads safer.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. Completely agree. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Just to quickly follow up on what Councillor Bradley was saying, my predecessor, Keith Egley, he was often, when he would rebut people's criticisms about ASDs, he would say that it's his goal to see zero revenue collected from them. And it's almost as if you want to spin the narrative. And when you describe your success stories, tell us about the cameras that have collected zero. When you tell us about the cameras that collected $20,000, all people see is tax. But when you say this camera collected nothing, that is success. So concern about road safety and traffic safety in my ward was by far the #1 concern. It was predominantly concerned about excessive vehicle speeding. So I'm really glad to be having this conversation, and I thank Councillor Johnson for, pushing the button so that we have this debate here today. Not debate, this conversation. So in noticing the 2024 Strategic Road Safety Action Plan's goal of calling for a 20% annual reduction in traffic fatalities by 2024, next year. And that is in concert with the longer term Vision Zero goal, council approved Vision Zero goal of 100% reduction in fatalities 10 years from now. That's a massive jump. It's a very, very ambitious target. But in looking at the data right there, it showed that between 2013 and 2017, and you compare that to 2017, 2021, there was a decrease of 4% in fatalities. So over 2 4-year spans, we've decreased by 40%, and yet we're projecting a 20% decrease annually by next year. So the metrics make it feel like we're not on target. So I'm certainly concerned about this. So I have a bunch of questions about this. Now, one of the objectives you listed as something that we need to achieve in order to reach this noteworthy critical goal is that we have to change culture. And I myself am guilty of using that buzzword, changing culture. It sounds really good. It is massive to overcome, massive, especially when we live in a city where when we do propose the kinds of vehicle-focused measures that must be done to address culture, it's not so much putting the onus on the pedestrian to wear a reflective vest. The onus has to be put on the driver. And as soon as we talk about these things, we are told publicly that we are engaging a war on cars. And yet in a war on cars, the victims I see, the people who are losing that war are the pedestrians, where 67% of the people who are dying are being hit by cars. So my question to you, my first question to you, and it's a big one. In your goal, because you mentioned you need to work with internal and external partners, and you said internal and external partners, and it's like you were signaling something to me. But if one of your goals is addressing changing culture, what are the biggest challenges for you in addressing culture internally and externally?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. I think you've raised some good points. Some of the challenges in terms of improving road safety culture internally is to get our messaging out there to all staff to make sure that road safety is a priority on everybody's mind. And I think through our road safety training course that's offered to staff, it's an in-depth 2-day course in which we have communications about the importance of road safety, also specific items that should be considered through the various people that are in the course. And we have a broad range of staff from our team, from transportation planning, roads, transit services. So we try to reach all areas throughout the city to make sure that the message of road safety is top of mind for everybody. In terms of our communication strategy, we are focusing on behavioral change and also focusing on our data to help us target certain demographics when we can analyze and see where certain types of collisions are or what emphasis area they're occurring in. We're making sure that our campaigns are reaching out more specifically to those areas. So those are the two things that we're sort of working on. And externally, we work closely with our partners. We're working closely with OPS on their new traffic plan. So I think in the past there's been challenges, but we're trying to move beyond those and make sure that road safety is top of mind for everybody.
Thank you. And just so you know, like I live in the same kind of ward as my counselor, my colleague, Councillor Johnson, where road safety design is often the greatest deterrent to road safety for us. So you were talking about the OPS as external partners. And I wanted to ask a question about that. One tool that my team has been using has been EvoWeb, which is the website where we can, pick a zone and observe what are the speeding, what are the rates of speeding on a particular street. You can zero in on a street and it'll tell you what the average speed is there, what the high speeds there are. For us, it helps us see where are the real dangerous pockets in our ward, and we relay that information back to traffic services. When I had a conversation with OPS about their best tactics for addressing traffic safety, and they agreed that automated speed enforcement cameras are likely the best approach, but that targeted police enforcement, putting a cop on a street with a radar gun, is often a good approach. They were unaware of EvoWeb data. I only spoke to 2 police officers about this, so not the entire force, but it seemed as if they were not aware that there's this tool that can show you, like, I'm 3 months into this job and I know where the traffic spots are, the high speed zones are. When I asked traffic services about whether or not there have been partnerships between traffic services and OPS, traffic services said they're kind of reluctant to use this info. I've got one constable who's coming in next week who eagerly wants to see this info, but has it been the city's experience that there's not a linkage between the traffic data, the speeding data we have through EvoWeb, and relaying that info usefully to OPS so that they can properly enforce?
Thank you, through you, Chair. For years, there's been a direct connection actually to OPS for our speed data. We used to send it every day at noon, straight over to OPS, including the speed board data, as well as any manual spot speed data that's collected by staff or through any other means that we collect speed data. We used to send that to OPS through a secure FTP server every day at noon for years. Over the last couple of years, though, we've been looking at modernizing that and creating more of a web-based, a tool that can be used so that folks in Ottawa Police Services who are identifying enforcement initiatives are able to see the data and identify and pinpoint locations where there are speeding issues. So, on a map basis, what we used to send was a PDF that had, the traditional speed data on it. So we're working on modernizing that right now.
Does that mean, however?
Oh, Councillor Devine, you're over the 5 minutes. You got 2 questions in the 5 minutes. We're not paid by the word, but feel free to go back onto the list if you wish. Councillor Trust.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if you could expand on the Revert Red education campaign that you mentioned.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Troster, through you, Chair. I'd like to invite Stu Edison, who is our Signals program manager and who is online, to respond to that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Councillor, for the question, and through you, Chair, the response. What would you like to expand on the Red River education campaign specifically?
Well, I guess my question is, this is an issue I've been hearing about for years, certainly before I was elected. And I know it was a subject of some discussion and controversy during the last term. So I'm just wondering, first of all, do you see any movement towards eliminating them or eliminating them in some situations? And then also, what steps is the city taking to ensure that in situations where revert reds exist, that those intersections are less dangerous for cyclists and pedestrians?
Very good. Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Chair. I'll answer through you. So Red Revert is a function of a traffic signal controller. It's actually a safety device that's in the traffic signal controller to ensure that if the loss of demand for side street movements, cyclists, pedestrians, or vehicle was to drop during the Main Street all red, we don't immediately go back to Main Street. We provide an extended all red before going back to Main Street. So that's the summation. It's a very technical answer. I appreciate that. What we've been doing is identifying locations where red revert does occur more frequently. It doesn't occur very much at all, to be frank. It only occurs in less than 2% of signal cycles from what the data shows us. but we're doing a more complex study and data acquisition of it. And there's actually a planned report back to committee in early next year is the plan at this point. We have been trying to educate cyclists on how Red River works, on adding signage to stress the need to stop at the stop line and wait for the signal to turn red before entering the intersection, which is standard practice for Highway Traffic Act requirements for any motorist or any vehicle, which a cyclist is, to wait for a green indication before entering the intersection. So we have installed signage locations across the city. We continue to expand that. We'll be installing another 75 locations with that signage this year. We've also installed a device or software update called Amber Lock, which is a functionality that if the side street vehicle, being a cyclist, waits until the end of the amber for Main Street before entering the intersection, the signal will ensure that it proceeds to provide green to side street. We've installed that at 241 locations across the city to date, and we continue to expand that as we go. That's really only a function that would work at an actuated intersection, so where you don't have to press a button or trigger with side street detection. We're also investigating technology that would provide a feedback display to a cyclist so they would know that they're detected. We have some products that we're evaluating. There's been challenge with that because of generally power supply is your biggest challenge with that device, and ensuring you have a device that provides the message back but doesn't imply you have right away. You don't want it to be misinterpreted as a green signal and someone make a decision based on that inappropriately. So we have a couple of products that we're evaluating, and we do plan to install some pilot devices in the field to get some more real life experience with those devices. So those are the campaigns or measures we've taken to date to try to address that. Our focus is on locations where there's high potential for cyclist use, so where we have marked on-road cycling facilities, multi-use pathways across the signalized intersection. Those are the target locations that are first priority for those types of devices.
That's great. Thank you. So can you just explain, I see a term joined signal phasing. So does that mean that when a car triggers a light change, the pedestrian light also changes?
Thank you, Councillor, through the chair. Yes, the joint PED is the function that we call that. It's again a software adjustment internal to the traffic signal controller, where when appropriate, if a side street is actuated by a vehicle, if the difference between the pedestrian time and the vehicle time is low, we'll automatically bring on the pedestrian display as well. That's more significant in the urban area where you have smaller size intersections, more pedestrian activity. The difference between the time it takes for pedestrian safely across the street is quite a bit longer than a vehicle at the larger intersections. Just examples would be obviously Unplowed Road, the crossing there far greater than the crossing of Bank Street for comparison. So the joint PED is a functionality that we have as well now. Again, it's only applicable in actuated intersections, but we continue to seek locations, and we do regular reviews of the signal timing and signal operations across the city. And as we're doing such, we implement measures such as that are appropriate for the location.
Yeah, that's great. So for example, limitations on turning right on red. How do you identify which intersections qualify? Because I hear about cars being cyclists being right hooked all the time. It's one of the greatest dangers for cyclists in the city.
Thank you, Councillor and Chair. So the right turn on red is something we do evaluate. It's a tool in the toolbox that can be applied when it's appropriate. We do field assessments of the location. We measure whether there's conflicts or near conflict between cyclists and pedestrians. We do review collision data as well as a measure to determine whether or not it's an appropriate measure. And one big one is in the design phase is evaluating sight lines and so forth and various other constraints that may make it a requirement. If it's a safety measure that we're implementing because of a sightline hazard or a geometric challenge, it's an all time of day right turn on red restriction. If it's based on demand for peak pedestrian volume or whatever the scenario would be, we have the option to implement for smaller windows of time as well if it's appropriate. we do assessments in the field on the actual conditions of the intersection. It's based on the nature of the pedestrian and community around the signal itself.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thanks for great questioning. As a matter of fact, Stuart, thanks for answering a lot of that. And former vice chair in the previous term of council, Leeper, was very concerned about a lot of this too. That's why some of those new measures are in place. And the amber lock, I don't know how much you know about that, but I think, and I'm seeing a nodding of a head, maybe we can actually go through an education exercise on amber lock and how fierce Councillor Leeper was on wanting to accelerate a lot of those programs as well. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to my colleagues for some great questions. I'm not part of the committee, as you know, but certainly it's an interest to all of us. And in established wards where you're dealing with what's there, the infrastructure that is there, it's a matter of changing habits, which is tough. And I'm proud of the fact that residents, and I take it that it's happening in all wards, are asking for people to slow down so they can have walkable communities, so they can have cyclable communities. It's overwhelming. I don't get a lot of requests for speeding up. It's all about slowing down. And I want to get an idea of how well the gateway signage is working. I've got it up in most of my communities and looking at other, opportunities as well. Sometimes signs don't just work, and we need to back it up with traffic calming. The temporary traffic calming that we get through our budget is seasonal, and that's a problem. The speed humps seem to be very helpful. Everybody wants them. Do we look at this as a way of, and I'm talking about residential streets, I'm not talking about the arterials necessarily, but sometimes we do need to do that. But just overall, speed limits, are we looking at that as a philosophy? Some European cities are doing 30K limits, or have been for a long time throughout the city. I understand Paris is. So why not? What's stopping us?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. The gateway speed limit installation has been rolling out across the city in residential areas for a number of years now. We haven't done in-depth review of any speed reductions related to those. It's not anticipated that there would be significant speed reductions when we change the signage on a roadway. We've said that for years. Changing the sign is not necessarily going to change the behavior. It has to be followed up with traffic calming or physical changes to the roadway in order to achieve a lower speed on roadways that were built to accommodate a much higher speed. The reason gateway speed limits have been rolled out is that as part of the culture change related to speeding, and speed is a big part of helping us achieve the goals of the Road Safety Action Plan. It's part of setting the expectations for residents about what we want as the speed within our local residential communities, and identifying that when they drive into the neighborhood, having it be consistent across all the neighborhoods so that residents know what's expected of them to help build that culture change. It's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to put up a gateway speed limit in an area and expect everybody to automatically drive at those speeds, but over time, it will help contribute to the culture change.
Thanks. This is Krista I'm talking to, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't see you but thank you. No, that's very helpful. Are we measuring when we put in traffic calming, and are we looking at the results of that? Because anecdotally, I see some changes, but how are we measuring those results? And I'm talking about both the permanent and temporary.
Thank you through you, Chair. I can speak to the temporary traffic calming part of it and ask Heidi Cousineau to join me up here to speak to the permanent part of it. But for the temporary traffic calming program, we were at the initial stages when it first rolled out, measuring the speeds before and after at all of the sites as we implemented them, and then continue to monitor them afterwards. The number of locations has increased significantly since then, and it's no longer feasible to review and continue to monitor every site on an annual basis going forward. You know, with over 800, speed board locations, it's challenging. So we have modified the way in which we're making recommendations for temporary traffic calming as well. We're starting to collect data at all new sites going forward before implementation, and then monitoring it afterwards as well, starting this year. So at least for new sites, we'll be verifying any speed reductions associated with the temporary traffic calming measures.
I appreciate that. Would that be available on open data, whatever you have available? And I understand you can't keep up with everything.
Sorry, through you, Chair, I missed that question.
Is the data that you're in terms of following through on certain streets or whatever, is it available on open data?
We do put our speed data on open data, yes.
Okay, so that you can see if there's been a traffic calming measure the following year, you can see if there's a reduction or whatever.
Correct, and we can share that with the councillors as well for their individual sites.
Yeah, well, thank you. It was mentioned about working with OPS, and it's kind of sad when I call that the last resort, because it's we're trying to catch them, and it's a sad sign if we have to go that direction. Yet we always have to pull that because and police can't be everywhere. So I'm hoping that we're looking at, if we have to have police come to a certain location, that we're doing something. But sometimes it's just bad behavior, such as rolling through stop signs. That I'm hearing this a lot near schools, and I don't know what we can do about that in terms of traffic calming, but that seems to be a problem as well. Is there any suggestions on that kind of behavior beyond education?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm just wondering if OPS is on the line. I believe Craig Roberts is supposed to be attending virtually. No, not hearing him.
Councillor Kavanaugh, maybe seeing that we don't have OPS online and this is an OPS specific issue, we'll get them to circle back around with you. Are they online? No.
Yeah, well, there are, raised crosswalks is one. I was hoping to come up.
As a practice, I work very closely with my community constable, and it's always a double-edged sword because you're going to ticket a lot of your local residents, even though we can't direct OPS. They certainly will come out and do those blitzes on occasion. And when you get hit in the pocketbook, it hurts. But we'll make sure somebody from OPS circles back around with you on that one, seeing that they're not online right now.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the work that staff is doing. Thank you, Heidi, Krista, whole team, Vivi. We're working towards getting there, and I hope that we'll consider more speed reductions in communities particularly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. When it comes to all the temporary traffic calming that we put perennially, have there been any considerations to kind of automatically trigger some sort of review to make some of those measures permanent? Let's say a street has had this stuff put up for 10 years in a row. I don't know how long the program's been around, actually. Let's say the street has had this stuff put up for many years in a row. The speed board supports that data. Is there any way we can do that? Like, would that require a direction or motion of some sort, maybe?
So through you, Chair, I'll answer this question. So the permanent traffic calming program, the neighborhood traffic calming program, there is no automatic trigger of how long it's had temporary traffic calming or not. There is a request process, and working with the residents and or the councillor, we can review the current stats of how it's working on that street. Each ward councillor views temporary traffic calming different and their intentions for it. But every time we could review this, if it would qualify for the neighborhood traffic calming, meeting the thresholds for that program and be considered for a future study.
Okay. Okay, cool. No, thanks very much. And are there any focus on major and minor collector roads when it comes to some of the road safety action plan stuff? I wrote this question down a long time ago, but many minutes ago. But are there any focuses on minor collectors that that might not necessarily be a bus route, but is known for dangerous driving or people driving a little too fast, mixed with pedestrians and cyclists and all that?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. So all the measures in the road safety action plan are data driven. So we use collision data and analysis to inform us of locations where there are high collision locations with severe injuries, as well as high risk locations. So we don't necessarily differentiate between roadway type. We're looking at network wide to identify the locations where improvements are the most critical.
Okay, and thanks very much. Last question. Sometimes the best way to communicate data like number of collisions, number of fatalities we've had on the road is to actually show our residents those numbers. I've seen, I think from my childhood, I remember a sign outside one of the tunnels in Hong Kong that says, you know, traffic fatalities, this number this year, and then it says like towards less or towards zero or something. This was a 90, so I don't think Vision Zero is a thing yet. Do you see any value in implementing something like that, maybe in one location or two locations that across the city?
Yes, thank you for the question through you, Chair. We are posting all our data on open data, so it is accessible to the public, but I think it's a great idea to have sort of a dashboard where we are focusing on presenting our current statistics in an easy, accessible way.
Okay, I'm not advocating for more like signage clutter, but I think some sort of variable display that digitally shows that number, like on the side of Hunt Club near Woodruff. I think it's an example, but might be of some value. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you so much. So again, I'm going to come back to the College Ward experience because as Councillor Devine says, traffic and road safety is the #1 complaint that we hear from our residents. People are worried. And with Bill 23, we're going to see more intensification, certainly with our new zoning bylaw and our official plan, we're encouraging greater intensification. And so change is coming. And to have to expect that road safety will be I appreciate the idea that we're trying to behavior change through education. And I know, you know, you can look at smoking, for example, as one of the ways that we've really created a culture change when it comes to bad behavior. But we also taxed cigarettes, bananas, right? And that really helped people to, and I say this as an ex-smoker myself on any given day, that, you know, the prices now really do help us to change our behavior. So I really am a strong believer that if the city of Ottawa wants to create better road safety, we can address behavior, but road design signals to people that they must slow down. And this is not a war against cars. This is actually a deep advocacy for increased meaningful choices in our outer urban wards that have been designed for cars. I want to be able to make healthier choices or different choices to do my shopping. I want to exemplify like a healthy lifestyle for my children instead of packing them in the car all the time. Also, it's a pain in the butt to pack your kids in the car all the time if you just need to do a tiny little errand. So there's a lot of different ways that this impacts the quality of life in our outer urban wards. So again, I come to road design and our investments in road design as a way for us to be able to drive behavior versus asking people to accept what we're positioning as a really good argument. So all this to say, I'm really interested in how we invest in retrofitting our outer urban wards through real permanent solutions, through planning and through retrofitting programs. And I know that I have spoken with all of you individually to say that I come at this in a place of complete support and championing the work that you do, not criticizing, but I really am trying to get at this gap that I'm feeling in our outer urban wards. We don't have the infrastructure renewal that will trigger that kind of investment. We don't have the road resurfacing in our local neighborhoods because right now there is a policy that we only resurface arterial roads. So our local and collector roads are crumbling and we can't get the investments that we need for road safety. In Nepean, we did not invest in streetlights or sidewalks as part of this pay-as-you-go program. And for that reason, I think Gloucester has some similar experiences. We've inherited a very uneven safe mobility experience through amalgamation. So I really am working very diligently to bring this to light. I want to help. So what kinds of retrofit programs are on offer for the outer urban wards? And what do we need to do to see real equity for safe mobility in our neighborhoods there?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the questions and the great points you've raised. I think I can speak to our 2023 implementation plan and the funding that has been allocated to that plan. We're proposing to use that funding in a way that supports the data-driven approach of the Road Safety Action Plan. So I can say that through the funding we are receiving, we're making sure that we're targeting those intersections or behaviors in the sense where we can have the best opportunity to reduce the fatal and major injury collisions. To your earlier points, I guess I can speak sort of to our colleagues in transportation planning, going back to the slide where I presented all the other city programs that do influence road safety. Transportation planning has a number of important policies and programs in place that help, as you said, in the road design piece of the program. So in terms of, for example, the protected intersection guidelines, which help to consider all the users of an intersection. It moves away from the traditional approach of vehicle-orientated design, not considering cyclists and pedestrians. So I don't know if our transportation planning partners wanted to add to that, but.
Yes, and of course, it's all driven through our policies like complete streets. So it's now part of everything that we do. All road designers must consider complete streets and the safety of all the users on the road, in addition to looking for opportunities to add landscaping, shade, benches, and all of that. So that is there, and we've been implementing this for years now. Of course, there's still some catch up to do for roads that have been built a while ago, but we pick up on these things. We fix them as part of either renewal work or road widenings, even transit projects. So they're all linked, and we're bringing actually the chair's permission. We're bringing the transportation master plan updates policies. And you will see there that there's a lot of emphasis on equity, safety, and all these things. And it's about moving people, not just moving vehicles, although not everyone can take transit or active transportation. So it's balanced. And we want to ensure that there's safety for everyone who uses these transportation facilities. So we work very closely with Kathy's team. We send our designs over there for her to have a look. So that we don't have to fix it after, do it right the first time.
So I would maintain that there is a gap when it comes to retrofit programs in existing neighborhoods that is not currently being addressed by City of Ottawa policies broadly. And that's something that I'll encourage this committee to consider, and something I'll be advocating with my other outer urban colleagues about quite a bit. What do we do in the interim? I appreciate that new builds have one solution, and I appreciate, Ariel Troster, that all of your sewers are made out of wood. So you'll get some sweet renewal, but I am concerned. I use my own, and I'm sure I'm going to get cut off, but I'll use my own intersection at Ix and Ix in College Ward. It's a beautiful intersection to look at in the snow because it's great. It's sweeping. It's like very stunning. We've got great trees, a lot to enjoy. But the width of this intersection, it's a T. The width of this T is enormous and it's really curved. So you can just bomb right around the corner and we don't narrow the roadways anywhere. I am going to see it on Centerpoint Drive. Thank you very much, Heidi. I'm very excited for that. So all this to say, I would also like to note in the absence of a true retrofit program, my residents expect enforcement. That is one of their key solutions when it comes to not getting those infrastructure pieces in place. And so to not have the police service on the call today, I do find that somewhat concerning because for me, that is a solution to address this stopgap. And I do hope that they will reach out to my office in the future to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And I agree. Well, I'll say the former city of Gloucester was the best, and you'll see the former city of Nepean was the best. It didn't have the strict guidelines that the old city of Ottawa had, and we're all learning to adapt to that. And I know we're very cognizant of it, and the TMP is one of those tools that is certainly there for us to use. I'm going to go to Councillor Gower because he hasn't had the opportunity to ask questions yet. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Chair. This is, you mentioned culture change, and it's come up in a number of the questions. And I'm curious from staff, just one of the examples, we are actually doing a lot proactively in new neighborhoods in designing roads, and typically they're designed for a vehicle speed of 30 kilometers an hour. And one of the common ways that is done is by narrowing the width of the road. And I get a lot of concerns from residents in my ward that the roads are too narrow. And in some cases, we've done neighborhood traffic calming projects where part of the neighborhood traffic calming is retrofitting older roads and narrowing intersections. And there's a lot of pushback we get from residents around this and a lot of confusion about why the city would be doing this. There's concern about the ability for fire trucks or garbage trucks to go through. There's concern about head-on collisions. Is it anywhere within the road safety action plan this year? Is there budget? Is there communications materials or any plan to help provide information or education to residents about why we're taking certain approaches through evolving approaches through design to help people understand? For a lot of people, they just want to see speed bumps everywhere. That's the solution. I would love to have, as a councillor, more of a toolbox of information that I could be sharing to residents about why roads are being designed differently, why we take a certain design approach. Could staff comment on that?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. Yes, through our 2023 communication strategy, we're looking at ways to better communicate to the public the measures that we are putting in place to improve safety. And we're also looking to work more closely with councillors and your offices to be able to spread that word and spread the word to the residents of your community. So we are looking at measures to improve our communications this year.
Okay, I'd love to chat with staff more offline and if possible, work with you on that, share some of the feedback we're hearing and explore some of the ways that we could get that information out to residents more effectively. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Devine and then Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to continue following up along a lot of the lines of questions about how speeding issues affect wards like my colleague, Councillor Johnson. And again, we're talking about a lot of things, including the change of culture. And this is not a note to anyone. It might even be a note to residents or a note to just some of our departments. Oftentimes when I was talking to stakeholders and residents about the effectiveness of speed bumps, and I know that the city has much different kinds of speed bumps that are not the kind of speed bumps of a long time ago. And the concern was often about, how the speed bump is going to be damaging to ambulances. And my response is always, I'm concerned about the next passenger of the next ambulance if we don't do this kind of thing. So I have my first question is, do you happen to know, are any speeding ticket levels, like the fine of a speeding ticket, are any of these enforced by the municipality or is that all set at the provincial level?
Thank you through you, Chair. It's all, they're set fines provincially. So,
Provincially.
yes.
Like, and this comes back to what you were saying about how we can work with external partners. And I know that that we're a big fan at this council of writing letters to the province. But to a certain extent, I'd like to address the issue of just a quick little anecdote. In Finland, speeding tickets are attributed based on income. Here, for some people, it's just the cost of having fun. And I would love to look at really truly effective measures about how to truly enforce them. So that might be a conversation for another day. Going back to what you were saying earlier about EvoWeb and traffic data speed display boards, you had mentioned that there used to be a time when we were sending that data daily to the police. And then you mentioned now we're working on modernizing the system through some kind of web-based thing where anyone can access the data. My question is, what happened? So you're saying we used to send the data, we're now working on things for the future. What's happening now? Is the data being sent to and or used by OPS?
Thank you, through you, Chair. It is not being sent, all of the data is not being sent to OPS as it was in the past. They've shut down our SFTP server because of outdated technology. And so hence the modernization process that we're looking at. We do, though, staff within traffic services, if they receive, a complaint where they go out and do some data collection related to speeding, if the operating speed is high, very high, they will share that with OPS for enforcement.
All right. I am enthused that I'm going to be having a conversation with OPS next week about this specifically. So going back to what Councillor Johnson was talking about when it comes to infrastructure gaps in some of the older neighborhoods like Ward 9, like Ward 8, sidewalks. So I had in your report on road safety action plan, you were identifying the various vulnerable road users that are going to be the objective of these safety initiatives: pedestrians, older adults, cyclists, and of course, school children. So a lot of traffic concerns in my ward revolve around schools. My office has been working effectively with traffic services to address concerns around school zones in Ward 9. One consequence of our growing population, and my entire purpose of being here is how do we as a city handle our growing population? But one impact of that is these older schools in these older wards are exceeding their capacity. And so you have far more people using these schools than perhaps they have space for. And so they're suffering from these very hazardous drop-off and pickup traffic conditions. My staff and I have been doing school safety assessments. We've been working with city staff. We've been working with Enviro Center. At one school, they were proposing a solution, and the only way to accomplish the solution is to have a sidewalk. They were looking for a pedestrian crosswalk, which we can't give them because they don't have a sidewalk, and we can't connect their street because the infrastructure that would support the safety measure is missing. At one school, we saw, whether it's due to bad road safety design, but at one school, when we were at we went there for a half hour in the morning and we just observed what was happening. There was just so much traffic that one parent, the only recourse they had to drop off their kid was to stop their car in the middle of a four-way stop. They didn't have any space to pull over. They stopped in the middle of a stop, let the kid out. Like, that's one heck of a kiss and go. That was the only option they had. I know that a lot of these issues pertain to to parents driving their kids to school when they don't truly need to. I know that often happens, but a lot of it is also attributed to road safety design or the lack of infrastructure in place. And so my question, from what we heard there in the road safety action plan, with traffic conditions specifically around schools being a major concern for mine, can you provide any more specific detail from the road safety action plan about how you are prioritizing road design or modifications around school zones specifically?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. Excuse me. In our high-risk driver emphasis areas, we're focusing on schools through two areas, as I mentioned, through our automated speed enforcement program, where we look to install cameras in school zones, and we have a way of prioritizing all the schools throughout the city. We also have, through our colleagues in transportation planning, a measure to implement engineered traffic calming measures within schools. So those are the main areas of focus related to schools. We don't have anything specific to adding in sidewalks. That's not part of the road safety action plan.
Can I ask a silly question?
You got 10 seconds and then you'll have to go back on the
In
board.
my ward, we have sidewalks that start on one corner and they end in the middle of the block. They just stop as if somebody took a long break, a long coffee break. If we are allowed to do that, can we put sidewalks purely at the intersection, like just a little elbow of a sidewalk so that we could then have a crosswalk attached to it? Silly question.
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. We do have another program in our department for pedestrian intersection and accessibility ramping, where we do address intersections where we have missing components of the intersection, like curbs and sidewalk receiving areas. So that's something we can definitely.
What's it called?
The PAIR program, Pedestrian Accessibility Intersection Ramping Program.
Thank you.
And we can definitely have some conversations offline about that.
Thank you.
If you like.
Vice Chair Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Quick point of clarification. One of our colleagues said there's a policy restricting resurfacing to arterials and collectors. Is there such policy, or maybe was she referring to maybe a priority scale and misremembered or something?
Sure, I can probably take that question. That's resides really with infrastructure services. I don't think it's a policy per se. I think when they brought forward the asset management plan during the last term of council, what they indicated was that the funding that was available allowed basically for the prioritization of arterials, major collectors, because those are the ones that present the higher risk. As we start to close the funding gap, then there's going to be the possibility to allocate more funding towards local streets. So I would say it's not necessarily a policy. It's not a policy. It's more basically a function of the availability of funds.
Okay, thanks very much.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you. This is something I've been meaning to ask for a while. In Quebec, I've seen it in several towns. They have school routes. They call them corridor scolaire, and they're routes that obviously kids are taking to school, encouraging walking, and I guess it's a partnership with schools, but it strikes me as just one more way of emphasizing the fact that routes are for people to walk on to get to places like schools. Is this something we've ever looked at?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. It's not something that we've specifically looked at in terms of designating routes for the preferred route for children to walk to school. Typically, there are many routes someone can choose to take in order to go to school. I'm not sure how Quebec designates these routes, if it's in terms of this is the preferred route or this is a potential route that somebody could take. But it's something we can certainly look into. But we haven't done that as of yet.
Yeah, it just sort of encourages the fact that people are walking, and yeah, obviously there's more than one route sometimes, but anyway, I see the signs all the time, and I always think they're great to encourage walking. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. Not seeing any further hands on the board. I want to say a tremendous thank you. We always like good news stories like this, so thank you for all the work you've done on this. So is this item carried? Great, thank you. And we'll move on to, there is no in-camera items. The IPD report on the use of delegated authority is within the agenda. Notices of motion. I believe that we have a motion for consideration at the next meeting that Councillor Johnson is going to read in on behalf of Councillor Kavanaugh, if that's correct. Thank you.
May I have it up on the screen, please? Whereas Woodruff Avenue between Richmond Road and Carling Avenue has 2 public schools in its immediate vicinity, with Woodruff Avenue Public School facing Woodruff Avenue. And whereas many students to both Woodruff Avenue Public School and Our Lady of Fatima walk to school and must cross over Woodruff Avenue. And whereas Woodruff Avenue will soon be receiving an automated speed camera to ticket vehicles going over the speed limit, and whereas the school hour speed limit on this stretch of road was 40 kilometers per hour during school hours, but then went back to 50 kilometers per hour when school was not in session, and these flashing school hour speed limit signs will be removed. And whereas Woodruff Park is also a community destination for residents in Wood Park and Woodruff North communities who must also cross Woodruff Avenue to get there. And whereas the speed limit on Woodruff Avenue from the SJAM Parkway to Richmond Road is 30 kilometers an hour, along with the speed limits in the adjacent Carlingwood community west of Woodruff and the Wood Park community east of Woodruff and both sides of the Woodruff North community. Therefore, be it resolved that Transportation Committee recommend Council approve that the speed limit on Woodruff Avenue between Richmond Road and Carling Avenue be reduced to 40 kilometers per hour permanently to put the community safety ahead of motor vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So that will be on our next regular agenda meeting. We don't have any inquiries. Other business, I'll just remind everybody at 4 o'clock today, the president's in town, so the roads are all going to get locked down, so hurry on home. And so on that, we have adjournment, and the next meeting will take place, our special meeting to consider the TMP on April 17th, 2023, with the next following regular meeting on April 27th, 2023. And I also want to give I hate naming people, I'll forget people, but thanks you to Chris and Caitlin for making this meeting run smoothly, and all the staff here today. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.